Every night at exactly midnight, the children of Crimson Hollow Orphanage would open their mouths in desperate agony, their faces contorted in silent terror, but no sound would emerge, only the movement of air, only the ghostly vibration of vocal cords that could no longer produce a single cry. For 3 years, this phenomenon haunted the institution until a cache of forbidden files revealed the horrifying truth behind Ohio's most respected children's home. Before we uncover the dark secrets hidden within those walls, I want to ask you to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button if you enjoy these real mystery stories. Also, tell us in the comments what city and country you're watching from. We love connecting with our international audience. Your support helps us bring you more of these chilling historical cases. But now, let's return to that cold autumn night in 1885, when everything began to unravel. According to the fragmentary records that survived and the whispered accounts passed down through generations, the mystery of Crimson Hollow Orphanage started with what seemed like an act of compassion. In the rolling hills of southwestern Ohio, just 15 miles from Cincinnati, the small farming community of Millbrook had always prided itself on Christian charity. The year 1885 found America in the midst of rapid industrialization, and the growing cities left behind countless orphaned children whose parents had perished in factory accidents, disease, or simply poverty. Crimson Hollow Orphanage stood like a beacon of hope on a gentle rise overlooking the Millbrook Valley. The red brick building, constructed in 1878 with funds donated by prominent Cincinnati businessmen, housed up to 60 children at any given time. Its Gothic Revival architecture, complete with pointed arch windows and decorative stonework, gave it an air of both grandeur and solemnity that impressed visitors and donors alike. Mother Superior Adelaide Thorne had run the institution since its founding. A stern woman in her 50s, with graying hair always pulled back in a severe bun, she commanded respect throughout the county. Born into a wealthy Cincinnati family, Adelaide had dedicated her life to child welfare after losing her own infant daughter to scarlet fever. Her reputation for placing orphaned children into good Christian homes was unparalleled in the region. The orphanage operated with military precision. Children rose at 5:30 each morning for prayers, followed by breakfast, chores, lessons, and more prayers before bed at 8 o'clock sharp. The staff consisted of 4 sisters from the local Methodist congregation, 2 male attendants who handled maintenance and discipline, and Dr. Harrison Webb, who visited twice weekly to tend to the children's medical needs. To the outside world, Crimson Hollow represented everything admirable about American charity. Visiting benefactors regularly praised the clean dormitories, the well-fed children, and Mother Adelaide's obvious devotion to her charges. The adoption records showed remarkable success. Nearly 40 children per year found permanent homes with families across Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. But within those red brick walls, sensitive children had begun to notice something troubling. Some of their fellow orphans, particularly those who caused problems or asked too many questions, would disappear suddenly. Mother Adelaide would announce that they had been blessed with immediate placement in exceptional homes, but there were never any letters, never any visits, never any word of how these children fared in their new lives. Young Timothy Brooks, age 12, had arrived at Crimson Hollow in March of 1885 after his parents died in a Cincinnati tenement fire. An intelligent boy with a gift for reading and writing, Timothy quickly noticed inconsistencies in the stories surrounding departed children. He began keeping a secret journal, hidden beneath a loose floorboard under his dormitory bed, documenting every disappearance and the circumstances surrounding it. The first incident that would eventually expose the truth occurred on September 23, 1885, during Timothy's 3rd month at the orphanage. Sister Margaret, the youngest and most compassionate of the staff, had been assigned the night watch that week. Her duties included checking on the children every 2 hours and ensuring all doors remained locked until morning. At exactly midnight, Sister Margaret was walking through the boys' dormitory when she witnessed something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. 4 boys in the far corner beds, children who had been among the most vocal about wanting to return to their former neighborhoods, were sitting upright in their beds. Their mouths were open wide, their faces twisted in expressions of pure terror and pain, their bodies rigid with what appeared to be screaming. But the dormitory remained completely silent. Sister Margaret approached the children, her oil lamp casting dancing shadows on the walls. As she drew nearer, she could see their lips moving, their throats straining, their eyes wide with desperation. The boys were clearly trying to scream, but only the faintest whisper of air emerged from their mouths. It was as if their voices had been stolen entirely. The phenomenon lasted exactly 3 minutes before the boys collapsed back onto their beds, exhausted and trembling. When Sister Margaret attempted to wake them and ask what had happened, they could only whisper in barely audible tones that their throats felt wrong and that they had been having the same nightmare again. Dr. Webb was summoned the following morning to examine the affected children. His initial diagnosis was a rare form of night terror combined with temporary vocal cord inflammation, possibly caused by the changing autumn weather. He prescribed warm honey and lemon tea and advised bed rest. However, when the same 4 children experienced identical episodes the next night and the night after that, Dr. Webb's explanation began to seem insufficient. Word of the strange midnight occurrences spread quickly among the staff, though Mother Adelaide strictly forbade any discussion of the matter outside the orphanage walls. She explained to her sisters that rumors of supernatural activity would damage their reputation and their ability to secure donations and adoptions for the children. The incidents, she insisted, were medical anomalies that would resolve themselves with proper treatment and prayer. But Timothy Brooks had witnessed the episodes from his bed across the dormitory, and his sharp mind began connecting disturbing dots. In his secret journal, he noted that all 4 affected boys had recently been disciplined for defiant behavior, specifically for demanding to know when they could return to their former neighborhoods or contact relatives who might still be alive. As autumn deepened into winter, the midnight episodes became a nightly occurrence, but only affecting specific children, always those who had shown resistance to the orphanage's strict rules or had asked uncomfortable questions about their futures. The affected group gradually expanded to include 3 girls from the dormitory above, all of whom shared the same troubling characteristic. They could barely whisper during the day, as if their voices had been permanently weakened. Sister Margaret's growing unease led her to make a discovery that would change everything. While cleaning Mother Adelaide's office in December of 1885, she accidentally knocked over a stack of ledgers, revealing a hidden compartment in the large oak desk. Inside, she found a collection of files that bore no resemblance to the official adoption records kept in the orphanage's main filing cabinets. These forbidden files contained detailed correspondence between Mother Adelaide and wealthy families across the Midwest, but the language used was coldly commercial rather than charitable. Children were described in terms of their utility and tractability. Prices were negotiated based on age, gender, and most disturbing of all, their capacity for discretion. The files revealed that families were specifically seeking children who would not or could not speak about their pasts. The monetary figures in these secret documents were staggering. While official adoption fees were typically $5 to $10 to cover administrative costs, these private arrangements involved payments of $50 to $200 per child. The files also contained detailed medical records signed by Dr. Webb, documenting surgical procedures performed on children who had been deemed vocally problematic. Sister Margaret's hands trembled as she read procedure after procedure, describing the surgical modification of vocal cords to ensure permanent discretion. The medical terminology was clinical, but the reality was horrifying. Children who asked too many questions or threatened to expose uncomfortable truths were being systematically robbed of their ability to speak above a whisper. But perhaps most chilling of all were the letters from purchasing families praising Mother Adelaide for providing children who were perfectly silent about their origins and incapable of sharing inappropriate details about their previous circumstances. These families weren't seeking children to love and nurture. They were purchasing human beings to serve as silent servants, farm laborers, or worse. The midnight episodes suddenly made terrible sense. The children's vocal cords had been deliberately damaged, but their desperate need to scream, whether from trauma, pain, or pure terror, remained. Their bodies went through the motions of screaming, but no sound could emerge except the movement of air through damaged throats. Sister Margaret faced an impossible moral dilemma. Exposing the truth would save future children from this fate, but it would also destroy her own life and potentially endanger the children currently at Crimson Hollow. Mother Adelaide wielded considerable influence in the county, and her connections to wealthy donors and prominent families made her virtually untouchable through normal channels. Instead, Sister Margaret chose a careful path of documentation and alliance building. She began secretly copying the most incriminating files during her night duties, hiding the copies in a small cavity behind a loose stone in the orphanage's basement foundation. She also started paying closer attention to Dr. Webb's visits, noting which children he examined privately and what medical supplies he brought with him. Young Timothy Brooks, meanwhile, had been conducting his own investigation. His journal had grown to include detailed observations about which children disappeared when Dr. Webb's private examinations occurred and the patterns surrounding the midnight episodes. But Timothy's inquiries hadn't gone unnoticed by Mother Adelaide, who began viewing the intelligent boy as a potential threat to her operation. In January of 1886, Timothy was informed that a wonderful opportunity had arisen for his immediate adoption by a farming family in rural Kentucky. Mother Adelaide explained that the family specifically requested an older boy who could help with heavy labor, and that Timothy's education made him an ideal candidate. The adoption would take place within the week, she announced, and there would be no time for goodbyes or correspondence with other children. But Timothy had read enough of his fellow orphans' fates to recognize the warning signs. That night he retrieved his hidden journal and added a final entry. "They mean to silence me like the others. If anyone finds this record, know that Mother Adelaide and Dr. Webb are not what they seem. The midnight screams are real, and they are caused by surgical mutilation of children's throats. I pray someone will stop them before more innocents suffer." He carefully wrapped the journal in oilcloth and hid it in the same basement cavity where Sister Margaret had been storing her copied files, not knowing that another person was documenting the same crimes. On the morning of January 15th, 1886, Timothy Brooks was scheduled for his final medical examination before adoption. Dr. Webb arrived earlier than usual, carrying a black leather bag that Sister Margaret had learned to associate with his most secretive procedures. But as Timothy was led to the medical room, Sister Margaret made a decision that would prove to be both courageous and catastrophic. She followed them down the corridor and positioned herself outside the medical room door, listening to the conversation within. What she heard confirmed her worst fears. Dr. Webb was preparing to perform the same vocal cord procedure that had been inflicted on dozens of other children. Timothy's intelligence and investigative nature made him too dangerous to allow his normal voice to remain intact. As Dr. Webb prepared his instruments, Timothy began to resist, his voice rising as he demanded to know what was happening to him. The boy's shouting echoed through the corridor, and Sister Margaret realized that other children would soon wake and potentially witness whatever was about to occur. In a moment of desperate inspiration, Sister Margaret burst into the room, claiming that Mother Adelaide had sent her to inform Dr. Webb of an urgent problem with one of the younger children. The interruption gave Timothy a chance to break free from the doctor's grip and flee the room, running toward the main entrance of the orphanage. But Timothy's escape attempt triggered a response that revealed just how systematic and prepared Mother Adelaide's operation had become. Within minutes, the two male attendants had been summoned, and they pursued Timothy with the efficiency of men who had clearly done this before. The boy was caught before he could reach the main road, and his desperate screams for help echoed across the empty winter landscape. What Timothy couldn't have known was that his cries were heard by Robert Finch, a traveling journalist from Cincinnati who had been riding past the orphanage on his way to interview families in Millbrook about their farming methods. Finch's trained ear detected something unusual in the quality of those screams, a desperation that went beyond typical childhood distress. Robert Finch's journalistic instincts compelled him to investigate further. Rather than continuing to Millbrook, he doubled back and spent the day discreetly observing Crimson Hollow Orphanage from a concealed position among the trees on the adjacent hillside. What he witnessed that evening would expose one of Ohio's most systematic crimes against children. As midnight approached, Finch watched through the dormitory windows as the now familiar scene unfolded. Multiple children sat upright in their beds, their mouths open in silent agony, their bodies convulsing with the effort to produce sounds that their damaged vocal cords could no longer make. The sight was so disturbing that Finch initially doubted his own observations, but the pattern repeated itself for 3 consecutive nights. On the 4th night, Finch approached the orphanage directly, claiming to be a potential donor interested in touring the facilities. Mother Adelaide, always eager to cultivate wealthy benefactors, welcomed him warmly and provided an extensive tour of the public areas. But Finch's real objective was to gain access to the building's interior so he could investigate further. During the tour, Finch employed techniques he had learned during his investigative reporting in Cincinnati's industrial district. He engaged Mother Adelaide in detailed conversations about the orphanage's operations, while mentally mapping the building's layout and noting inconsistencies in her explanations. When she claimed that all medical procedures were performed with the children's comfort and consent, Finch asked to meet some of the recently adopted children to hear their testimonials. Mother Adelaide's response was telling. She explained that the orphanage's policy strictly prohibited contact with children after adoption to help them fully integrate into their new families without dwelling on their institutional past. Indeed, when Finch pressed for the names and addresses of recent adoptive families so he could verify their satisfaction with the process, Mother Adelaide became evasive and suggested that such inquiries might violate the family's privacy. That night, Finch broke into the orphanage through a basement window he had identified during his tour. Using a small lantern, he began systematically searching for documentation that might explain the disturbing phenomena he had witnessed. In the basement's stone foundation, his light revealed a loose stone that had clearly been disturbed recently. Behind that stone, Finch discovered a cache of documents that would bring down the entire operation. Sister Margaret's copied files detailing the financial arrangements and surgical procedures, and Timothy Brooks' journal documenting the systematic abuse of children who had dared to ask questions. The evidence Robert Finch uncovered was overwhelming and meticulously documented. The forbidden files revealed a 3-year operation in which Mother Adelaide Thorne and Dr. Harrison Webb had sold over 120 children to wealthy families who specifically wanted servants incapable of revealing family secrets or testifying about potential abuse. The surgical procedure developed by Dr. Webb involved making precise incisions to the vocal cords that left children capable of whispers but unable to produce loud speech or screams. The operation was presented to the children as treatment for throat infections, and they were told that their voices would return after recovery. They never did. Finch's newspaper expose in the Cincinnati Commercial Gazette created a scandal that reached the highest levels of Ohio politics. The investigation revealed that Mother Adelaide had cultivated relationships with judges, politicians, and business leaders who had either purchased children themselves or facilitated the illegal adoptions in exchange for financial considerations. Dr. Webb was arrested and charged with assault and battery against minors, practicing medicine under false pretenses, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking. During his trial, he revealed the full scope of the operation, claiming that he had been coerced into performing the procedures under threat of exposure for previous medical malpractices. Mother Adelaide Thorne fled Ohio before she could be arrested, but she was eventually apprehended in St. Louis, attempting to establish a similar operation under an assumed name. She was returned to Cincinnati to face charges of human trafficking, conspiracy, fraud, and child endangerment. Sister Margaret was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony and her courage in documenting the crimes. She later established a legitimate orphanage in Columbus, Ohio, where she spent the rest of her career ensuring that children's voices were heard and protected. Timothy Brooks survived his ordeal with his voice intact, thanks to Sister Margaret's intervention. He was eventually adopted by Robert Finch himself, who had been moved by the boy's courage and intelligence. Timothy grew up to become a lawyer, specializing in children's rights, and he dedicated his career to ensuring that institutions like Crimson Hollow could never operate in secrecy again. The midnight episodes at Crimson Hollow had a purely physical explanation, but one that made them no less horrifying. The damaged vocal cords of the affected children created unusual air pressure patterns when they attempted to scream during nightmares or trauma responses. The resulting movement of air through scarred tissue produced the ghostly vibrations that Sister Margaret had witnessed, while the children's desperate need to vocalize their terror remained trapped within their mutilated throats. The Crimson Hollow Orphanage was closed permanently in 1887, and the building was eventually demolished in 1902. But the case established legal precedents for the protection of institutionalized children and the mandatory oversight of adoption procedures that continue to influence child welfare policy today. This story reminds us that the most profound horrors are often perpetrated not by supernatural forces, but by human beings who exploit society's most vulnerable members. The forbidden files of Crimson Hollow Orphanage revealed that evil can hide behind the mask of charity, and that the voices of children, even when stolen by surgical knife, can still find ways to speak the truth. What do you think about this historical case? Do you believe such systematic abuse could have remained hidden for so long? Leave your comments below, and if you found this story compelling, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and share this video with someone who appreciates true historical mysteries. Until next time, remember that the most important voices to protect are often the quietest ones.